The champagne flutes clinked in the grand ballroom as Charleston's elite celebrated my sister's wedding, a $750,000 spectacle that had taken over a year to plan. But I wasn't there. I was 4,000 miles away in Paris, standing in front of the Eiffel Tower at sunrise, wearing a custom ivory gown that cost a fraction of her flower budget, while a photographer captured images that would soon be seen by millions. When my phone started exploding with notifications 3 days later, I realized something extraordinary had happened. My single Instagram post, one photo, one moment of reclaiming my own narrative, had gone viral in ways that would eclipse every carefully orchestrated detail of my sister's perfect day. The same family who had deemed me too much of a distraction to invite to their celebration was about to discover that you can't dim someone's light just because it threatens to outshine your own. But to understand how I got there, how a woman goes from being erased from her own family's milestone to accidentally launching a global movement about self-celebration, we need to go back. Back to the afternoon when my mother sat me down in their pristine Charleston living room and delivered news that would change everything. My name is Amara, and for 27 years, I had perfected the art of being invisible. Not because I lacked ambition or talent, but because I had learned early that in my family, there was only room for one star, and that star was my younger sister, Isabella. Isabella was everything our parents had dreamed of: polished, conventional, effortlessly charming in that way that opens doors and wins hearts. She had married Gregory, a wealthy investment banker, landed a coveted position at a top marketing firm, and lived in a townhouse that my mother loved to feature in her social media posts. Meanwhile, I was a freelance photographer scraping by in a studio apartment, chasing artistic dreams that my family viewed as adorably impractical at best and disappointingly irresponsible at worst. I had made peace with being the overlooked daughter. Or at least, I thought I had. The day everything changed started ordinarily enough. My mother had called asking me to stop by for tea, a request that should have raised red flags immediately, since we weren't the kind of family that did casual afternoon tea. When I arrived at their colonial-style home, the one with the perfect garden and the gleaming windows that reflected their perfect image back to the world, my mother was waiting in the living room with that particular expression she wore when delivering news she knew I wouldn't like but expected me to accept gracefully. "Amara, darling, sit down," she said, her voice honey-sweet in that southern way that could make even cruelty sound like kindness. "We need to discuss Isabella's wedding." I sat, my camera bag still slung over my shoulder, wondering if she was about to ask me to photograph the event for free again. It wouldn't have been the first time my skills were volunteered without compensation. "The wedding is going to be quite the affair," she continued, smoothing her skirt with perfectly manicured hands. 300 guests, the Magnolia Plantation venue, custom Vera Wang gown, celebrity florist from New York. Isabella's vision is simply breathtaking. 2 bridal magazines have already confirmed they'll be covering it. "That sounds beautiful," I said, genuinely meaning it despite the complicated knot of emotions I always felt about Isabella's successes. "I'm happy for her." My mother's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, well, that's actually what I wanted to discuss with you. The thing is, Amara, this wedding is Isabella's moment to shine. She's worked so hard for this, and Gregory's family is incredibly prominent. The guest list is very carefully curated: senators, business executives, socialites. It's not just a wedding, it's a statement about the kind of family we are." Something cold began spreading through my chest. "Mom, what are you saying?" She sighed, as if I was being deliberately difficult. "I'm saying that we've discussed it as a family, and we think it's best if you don't attend the wedding. You understand, don't you? It's nothing personal, darling. It's just that your presence would be complicated." The word hung in the air between us like a slap. "Complicated how?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, Amara, you know how you are." She waved her hand dismissively. "You're always in those bohemian clothes with your camera equipment, talking about artistic integrity and unconventional career paths. Isabella's friends are all polished professionals. Gregory's family expects a certain image. And frankly, having to explain why the older sister is a struggling freelancer while Isabella is so successful, well, It would just raise questions we'd rather not address on her special day. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Are you seriously telling me I can't come to my own sister's wedding because I might embarrass you? Don't be dramatic, my mother said, her voice sharpening. This isn't about embarrassment. This is about protecting Isabella's day. She's been planning this for over a year. The venue alone cost $75,000. Every detail has been meticulously orchestrated. We can't have distractions. Distractions, I repeated numbly. That's what I am to you. A distraction? You're being emotional now, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. My mother stood, signaling the conversation was over. I knew you'd understand once we explained. You've always been so sensible about these things. We'll have a nice family dinner after they return from their honeymoon. Just the immediate family. That will be your chance to celebrate with them. I stood slowly, my legs feeling disconnected from my body. Does Isabella know you're telling me this? Of course. We discussed it as a family. Your father agrees completely. Even your grandmother thought it was the right decision. My mother walked toward the door, expecting me to follow. Honestly, Amara, you should be relieved. $750,000 for a wedding? That's the kind of pressure and scrutiny you wouldn't want to be around anyway. This way you can just enjoy your weekend doing whatever it is you do. Whatever it is you do. 27 years of passion and hard work reduced to a dismissive afterthought. I walked to my car in a daze. It wasn't until I was sitting in the coffee shop parking lot 3 blocks away, staring at my phone, that the full weight of what had just happened crashed over me. My family, my mother, my father, my sister, everyone, had collectively decided I wasn't worth including in a major family milestone because my presence might somehow tarnish their perfect image. The tears came hot and fast, streaming down my face as I gripped the steering wheel. But underneath the hurt, something else was stirring. Something that felt dangerously like clarity. For years, I had made myself smaller to accommodate their comfort. I had accepted being overlooked, dismissed, undervalued. I had convinced myself that being the easy one, the understanding one, the one who never made waves, was a virtue. But in that moment, sitting in that parking lot with tears ruining my makeup, I realized something profound. Being easy to overlook doesn't make you noble. It makes you invisible. And I was done being invisible. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and opened my banking app. My savings account showed $4,800, money I'd been carefully setting aside for new camera equipment. It wasn't much, but as I stared at that number, an idea began forming. Something reckless and bold and completely unlike the compliant, sensible Amara my family expected me to be. If they didn't want me at Isabella's perfect wedding, fine. But that didn't mean I had to spend that weekend alone in my apartment, scrolling through social media photos of an event I'd been banned from attending. That didn't mean I had to make myself small and quiet and grateful for whatever scraps of acknowledgement they might toss my way afterward. I opened my laptop right there in the parking lot and searched, Paris photographer bridal shoot. The idea that had been whispering in the back of my mind suddenly roared to life. If Isabella was going to have her dream wedding with 300 guests fawning over her, then I was going to create my own celebration. One that required nobody's permission. One where I was the star of my own story. And I was going to do it in the most beautiful city in the world. Growing up, Isabella and I had been close, or at least, I remembered it that way. There were years when we built blanket forts together and shared secrets whispered under covers long after bedtime. But somewhere around the time she turned 10 and I turned 13, something shifted. The dynamic changed in ways I didn't fully understand until much later. Isabella discovered she had power in our family. She learned that when she wanted something, a perfectly timed tear or accusation could get it. She figured out that our parents would always choose her version of events over mine. And once she realized she could get what she wanted by positioning herself as the victim and me as the problem, our relationship was never the same. The pattern started small. When I was 15, I'd saved money from babysitting for months to buy my first professional camera, a used Canon that represented everything I dreamed of becoming. When it arrived, Isabella threw a tantrum about how I got something expensive while she got nothing. Within a week, our parents bought her a brand new laptop that cost 3 times what my camera did. "We need to be fair," my mother had explained when I protested. "You got your camera, Isabella needs her computer for school." Never mind that Isabella's need had only materialized after seeing my camera. Never mind that I'd worked for my purchase while hers was simply handed to her. The message was clear: Isabella's happiness was the priority, and my achievements existed only to be overshadowed by her needs. In college, while I worked 3 part-time jobs to cover expenses my minimal scholarship didn't touch, Isabella received a brand new car for her 18th birthday, a BMW with a bow on top, presented at a family gathering where everyone celebrated her becoming a woman. When I graduated with honors and a portfolio that had already earned me freelance work, the family dinner lasted an hour before Isabella monopolized the conversation with talk of her upcoming sorority formal. After graduation, the disparity only grew more obvious. I was struggling to establish my photography business, taking on unglamorous jobs to build my portfolio and reputation. Meanwhile, Isabella landed her marketing position and immediately started making more money than I could dream of. Our parents' pride was palpable, barely concealed in every conversation. "Isabella just closed a major campaign," my mother would announce at family gatherings, her voice ringing with satisfaction. "The firm is so impressed with her. She's going places." And when people politely asked about me, "Oh, Amara's still doing her photography thing." You know how artistic types are, always chasing the dream. The patronizing tone, the subtle dismissal, the clear hierarchy, it all accumulated over years until I had internalized a fundamental belief: I was the supporting character in my family's story. Isabella was the protagonist, and my role was to fade into the background and make her shine brighter by comparison. I should have been angrier about it. Part of me was buried beneath layers of acceptance and rationalization. But mostly I was just tired. Tired of hoping that someday they might see me as equally valuable. Tired of making myself smaller so Isabella could expand. Tired of the weight of being perpetually, profoundly unseen. The wedding exclusion wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was the culmination of everything that had come before, the final, unambiguous statement about my worth in this family. 3 days after my mother's living room announcement, the official wedding invitation arrived in my mailbox. Heavy cardstock with gold embossing and elegant calligraphy that probably cost more per card than I spent on groceries in a week. It was addressed to my parents, with a note card listing the invited family members. Every single person was listed. Both sets of grandparents. Aunts and uncles I barely knew. Cousins I'd met maybe twice. Everyone except me. The omission was deliberate. Documented. Undeniable. I stared at that invitation for a long time, sitting cross-legged on my apartment floor with tears streaming down my face. This wasn't an oversight or a miscommunication. This was a clear statement: Amara, you are not wanted here. Amara, you are not part of this family's proudest moment. Amara, your existence is an inconvenience we'd rather not acknowledge. That night, I called my best friend, Maya. We'd met 5 years ago at a photography workshop and had stayed close despite living in different cities. She was one of the few people who understood my family dynamics without judgment, who had witnessed enough holiday gatherings and phone calls to see the patterns I'd spent years defending. "They didn't invite you," Maya's voice rose in disbelief when I told her. "To your own sister's wedding." "Amara, that's not just hurtful, that's deliberately cruel." "My mom said I'd be a distraction," I said, my voice flat with exhausted acceptance. That Isabella's special day shouldn't be complicated by having to explain why her older sister is a struggling artist while she's so successful. That's insane. What are you going to do? I took a breath, feeling something click into place. I'm thinking about going to Paris during her wedding weekend. Silence on Maya's end. Then, tell me everything. I've been researching. There's a photographer in Paris who does high-end bridal-style shoots for travelers. Custom gown, professional hair and makeup, sunrise shoot at the Eiffel Tower. It's expensive, but I can afford it if I'm careful with everything else. You want to have your own wedding shoot without a wedding? Why not? The question came out stronger than I felt. If they're going to erase me from family milestones, I might as well create my own. I'm a photographer, I understand the power of a beautiful image. And honestly, Maya, I need to do something for myself. Something that proves I exist and I matter, even if my family doesn't think so. When do we leave? We? Amara, there is no universe in which I let you do this alone. I have vacation days saved up. Let me look at flights right now. That conversation transformed everything. Suddenly, it wasn't just a fantasy or an impulsive reaction to hurt. It was a real plan with a real friend who believed in me enough to literally fly across an ocean. The Paris trip became more than revenge or escape, it became an act of reclaiming my own narrative. Over the next month, I worked constantly. Every photography job I could find, I took: corporate headshots, real estate listings, family portraits, engagement sessions. I said yes to everything, even projects I'd normally turn down, because every dollar brought me closer to Paris. My savings account slowly grew: $5,200, then $5,800, then $6,400. I researched obsessively. Paris neighborhoods, hotel options, the best croissants, the most photogenic spots at different times of day. And I found Isabella, a photographer based in the 7th arrondissement who specialized in exactly the kind of shoot I envisioned. When I contacted Isabella explaining what I wanted, a solo bridal shoot, empowering and beautiful, capturing me as the main character of my own story, her response was immediate and enthusiastic. "I love this concept," she wrote back in charmingly accented English. "So many women do this now. They celebrate themselves without waiting for someone else to give them permission. I have a dress designer friend who can create something custom for you. Send your measurements and your vision. We will make magic together." The dress alone would cost $1,500. The photography package was another $2,000. Flights and hotel for Maya and me would be roughly $3,200 combined. Hair and makeup, another $300. It all added up to more money than I'd ever spent on myself at once, more than I'd spent on myself in the past 2 years combined, probably. Every time doubt crept in, every time I hesitated over the expense or questioned whether I was being petty, I thought about that invitation with my name conspicuously absent. I thought about my mother's casual dismissal, "You understand, don't you?" The assumption that I would simply accept being erased. 3 weeks before Isabella's wedding, I booked everything. Flights, hotel, photography session, dress measurements sent to the designer. It was happening. It was real. I was actually doing this. I didn't tell my family. They didn't ask what I'd be doing that weekend anyway. I'm sure they assumed I'd spend it quietly at home, maybe working on my portfolio or catching up on Netflix, definitely not making any waves that might ripple back to their perfect celebration. But I told Maya everything as we planned. She was more excited than I was, researching Paris cafes and making lists of what we'd do beyond the photo shoot. "This is bigger than just taking pretty pictures," she said during one of our planning video calls. "This is about reclaiming your narrative. About proving that you don't need their validation to celebrate yourself." She was right, though I didn't fully understand just how right until much later. This trip was becoming something transformative, not just a response to exclusion, but an active choice to define my own worth. My phone buzzed one evening in late May, about 3 weeks before the wedding. A text from Isabella, the first direct communication I'd received from her since the wedding planning had begun. "Mom said you understood about the wedding. I appreciate you being mature about it. It's nothing personal. Just trying to keep things simple and focused on the right energy. Hope you understand." Red heart, I stared at that message for a long time. Nothing personal. As if excluding your only sibling from the biggest day of your life was just a practical decision, like choosing chicken over fish for the main course. As if erasing me from the family narrative was simply about maintaining the right energy. The heart emoji at the end felt like a particular cruelty, a performance of warmth that didn't extend to actually caring about my feelings. I typed and deleted several responses. Finally, I settled on something simple: I hope you have a beautiful day. I meant it, in a complicated way. I hoped Isabella got everything she wanted from her extravagant celebration. I hoped the flowers were perfect and the cake was delicious and the photos captured every carefully orchestrated moment. Because I was about to get something too, something that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with finally putting myself first. The week before the trip, my nerves intensified. I second-guessed everything. Was I being vindictive? Was this just expensive revenge that would leave me broke and hollow? What if nobody cared about my Paris photos? What if I was making a huge mistake? But then my mother called, and all those doubts evaporated like morning fog. Isabella is so stressed, she said without preamble, as if we were mid-conversation. The final alterations on her dress aren't perfect, and the florist had to substitute 2 types of peonies. Can you imagine? After all the planning, these little disasters keep happening. That sounds frustrating, I said neutrally. She's handling it beautifully, though. She's such a professional. Gregory's mother is hosting a luncheon tomorrow for the wedding party and immediate family. The country club is doing their special spring menu. It should be lovely. Immediate family. A category I apparently no longer belong to. I'm sure it will be nice, I managed. Are you working that weekend? My mother asked, and there was something in her tone that made me think she actually hoped I'd be busy, that I'd have some concrete excuse for my absence that would make the whole situation feel less cruel to outside observers. I have plans, I said carefully. Oh, good. I'm glad you'll have something to occupy yourself. The relief in her voice was palpable. I was worried you might spend the whole weekend feeling sorry for yourself. This way you can just have a nice, quiet day doing whatever it is you enjoy. After we hung up, I pulled out my suitcase and started packing with renewed determination. Maya was flying in 2 days before our Paris departure, staying with me so we could travel together. The dress designer had sent confirmation photos of the completed gown, and it was breathtaking, a flowing ivory creation with delicate beading on the bodice and a skirt that would move like water in photographs. It was everything I'd envisioned and more. When Maya arrived, we spent the evening going over every detail of the trip. She'd even brought props, a delicate vintage veil she'd found at an estate sale and a small bouquet of silk flowers that could be used for photos. This is going to be incredible, she said, scrolling through Isabel's portfolio on her tablet. Look at these shots. You're going to look like you stepped out of a fairy tale. I looked at the images, stunning women in beautiful gowns at iconic Paris locations, each photo telling a story of confidence and celebration. In 2 days, that would be me. Do you think I'm being vindictive? I asked, voicing the fear that had been nagging at me. Maya set down the tablet and looked at me seriously. I think you're being human. They excluded you from a major family event and expected you to just disappear quietly. You're not crashing the wedding or trying to ruin anything. You're simply living your life in a way that brings you joy. That's not vindictive. That's self-preservation. We flew out on Thursday evening, landing in Paris early Friday morning local time. Despite being exhausted from the overnight flight, I felt electric with anticipation. The city was everything I'd imagined, elegant and historic and alive with a kind of beauty that made my photographer's heart sing. Our hotel was a small boutique place in the 7th arrondissement, within walking distance of the Eiffel Tower. The room was tiny but charming, with tall windows that overlooked a narrow street lined with cafes. After checking in and napping for a few hours to fight the jet lag, we met with Isabel at her studio. She was exactly what I'd hoped for, warm and enthusiastic, her English excellent despite a charming accent. She welcomed us like old friends, immediately putting me at ease. The dress arrived yesterday, she said, leading us to a back room where it hung on a dress form. I think you will be very pleased. It was more beautiful in person than in photos. The ivory fabric had a subtle sheen that caught the light perfectly. The beading was delicate and tasteful, creating patterns that looked like morning frost. The skirt flowed in layers of soft tulle that would move beautifully in photographs. I reached out to touch the fabric, my eyes filling with tears. It's perfect. You're going to look like a queen, Maya said softly. We begin at 5:30 tomorrow morning, Isabel explained. The light at sunrise is magical, and there will be fewer tourists. Hair and makeup starts at 4 o'clock. I know it's very early, but trust me, the results will be worth losing a little sleep. That evening, Maya and I wandered Paris in the golden light of late afternoon. We grabbed dinner at a small cafe, sitting outside and watching the city move around us. I tried not to think about what was happening back home in Charleston, wedding guests arriving, Isabella probably having a spa day or attending some pre-wedding event, my parents in their element, hosting and being proud. And I was here, in Paris, about to create something entirely my own. We went to bed early, setting multiple alarms. At 3:30 in the morning, we stumbled awake in the dark, both of us running on adrenaline and excitement. The hair and makeup artist Isabel had arranged met us at the hotel, a cheerful woman named Celine who transformed my usually casual appearance into something ethereal. She wove tiny fresh flowers into my upswept hair and gave me makeup that was natural but polished, the kind that enhances rather than masks. By 5 o'clock in the morning, dressed in the ivory gown with Maya helping me navigate the layers of tulle, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. I looked like someone worth celebrating. Isabella's going to lose her mind when she sees these photos, Maya said, grinning as she took pictures with her phone. If she sees them, I corrected. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with them yet. That was partly true. I had ideas, but nothing felt concrete. Part of me wanted to post the images publicly, to create a visible reminder that I existed and could create beauty without their permission. But another part wanted to keep them private, a secret rebellion that only I would fully understand. Isabel picked us up in her car, and we drove through the quiet Paris streets to the Trocadero Gardens. The sky was just beginning to lighten, a soft pink glow spreading across the horizon. And there it was, the Eiffel Tower, standing before us in all its iconic glory, dramatic and breathtaking in the pre-dawn light. Perfect, Isabel murmured, already assessing angles and light. This is going to be beautiful. For the next 2 hours, we moved through the gardens and surrounding areas. Isabel directed me with professional expertise, turn this way, lift the dress, look toward the tower, walk along this path, let the veil catch the breeze. Maya assisted with the dress train, making sure everything flowed perfectly, taking behind-the-scenes photos on her phone. It was magic. There's no other word for it. As the sun rose and golden light spread across the scene, something shifted inside me. I forgot about being excluded from Isabella's wedding. I forgot about being the overlooked daughter. In that moment, standing in one of the most beautiful cities in the world, wearing a gorgeous gown and feeling the warm light on my face, I was simply Amara, a woman celebrating herself because she deserved celebration. Not because someone else decided she was worthy. Not because she'd earned permission through achievement or compliance. Simply because she existed and that was enough. When Isabel finally lowered her camera, she was smiling. We have something very special. I can feel it. These are going to be extraordinary. We changed locations for additional shots, by the Seine, on a picturesque bridge, in a small park with cherry blossoms. By 8 o'clock in the morning, we were finished. I was exhausted but exhilarated, running on adrenaline and something that felt dangerously close to joy. Back at the hotel, I changed out of the dress carefully, hanging it where I could see it. Maya and I collapsed onto our respective beds. That was unreal, Maya said. Seriously, Amara, you just created art. You just made a statement that's going to echo. I smiled, feeling something I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. Not happiness exactly, but validation. Proof that I could create my own beautiful moments without needing anyone's approval. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother, wedding day. Everything looks perfect. Isabella is glowing. Wish you could see how beautiful everything is. The casual cruelty of that message, wish you could see, as if my absence was some unfortunate circumstance rather than a deliberate exclusion, made my jaw clench. I didn't respond. Instead, I closed my eyes and let myself drift into sleep, satisfied in a way I couldn't quite articulate. Tomorrow, I would see the photos. Tomorrow, I would decide what to do with them. Tomorrow, everything might change. But for now, I rested, knowing I had done something brave and beautiful and entirely for myself. We spent the rest of Saturday exploring Paris, but my mind kept drifting back to Charleston. By now, Isabella's ceremony had started. I imagined the venue, probably decorated within an inch of its life, every detail meticulously perfect. 300 guests in formal attire. My parents greeting everyone with proud smiles, playing the role of the perfect family. And nobody would mention me. Nobody would ask where the older daughter was. If anyone did, my parents probably had a prepared answer: oh, Amara couldn't make it. She had work commitments. Something vague and dismissive that would shut down further questions. Maya noticed my distraction as we sat at a cafe in the Marais that evening, the kind of charming place with outdoor seating and twinkle lights strung overhead. "You're thinking about it," she said gently. "Hard not to," I admitted, stirring my coffee without drinking it. "I keep wondering if anyone even noticed I'm not there." "Their loss," Maya said firmly. "And honestly, after what we did this morning, after those photos we're going to see tomorrow, you've already won. You already came out on top of this." I wanted to believe her. But there was a hollow feeling in my chest that wouldn't quite go away. It wasn't jealousy of Isabella's wedding exactly. It was grief for the family relationship I'd always wanted but never had. Grief for being the daughter who wasn't worth including. Sunday morning, we met Isabella at her studio to review the photos. She had a large monitor set up, and as she pulled up the first image, I gasped audibly. It was me, but somehow more than me. The morning light created an almost ethereal glow. The Eiffel Tower rose behind me, perfectly framed. The dress flowed around me like water frozen in time. My expression was serene, confident. I looked beautiful in a way I'd never seen myself before. "Keep going," Maya breathed, leaning forward. Isabel clicked through image after image. Each one was stunning. Some were dramatic, with dark silhouettes against the lightning sky. Others were soft and romantic, with the veil catching the breeze just right. There were close-ups showing the dress details and wide shots that captured the scope and grandeur of the location. "These are professional quality," I said, my voice catching with emotion. "These could be in magazines." Isabel smiled warmly. "They should be. You have a gift for the camera, Amara. Many people freeze or look artificial in photos, but you understood the assignment. You embodied the vision beautifully." We spent the next hour selecting the best images for final editing. Isabel promised to have them ready by Tuesday, our last full day in Paris before flying home Wednesday morning. As we left the studio, Maya grabbed my arm. "You need to post these. I know you're hesitant, but these are too good to keep private. These are too powerful." "I don't know," I said uncertainly. "What if it seems like I'm trying to upstage Isabella?" "What if it does?" Maya challenged. "She excluded you from her wedding, Amara. She doesn't get to control how you spend your time or what you share about your own life. These photos aren't about her. They're about you." We spent Sunday and Monday being tourists, visiting museums, eating incredible food, wandering through neighborhoods that felt like movie sets. But my mind kept returning to those images. Maya was right. They were too beautiful to hide. And more than that, I had worked hard for them. I had saved money, planned extensively, taken a risk. Why should I diminish my own achievement because it might overshadow my sister? By Monday evening, I'd made a decision. When Isabel sent the final edited images Tuesday morning, I would post one. Not to hurt Isabella, but simply to share something I was proud of. If my family had a problem with that, Well, they should have thought about that before excluding me. Tuesday afternoon, the edited photos arrived in my inbox. They were even more stunning with Isabella's professional editing, the colors rich, the lighting perfect, every detail polished to perfection. I spent an hour choosing which one to post. Finally, I settled on an image taken right as the sun broke the horizon. I stood in profile, looking toward the Eiffel Tower, the dress catching golden light. The composition was flawless, the mood both romantic and powerful. Now came the caption. I typed and deleted several versions, trying to find the right tone. Not bitter, not angry, but confident and unapologetic. Finally, I settled on something simple, no invite needed to shine brighter. Sparkles. I stared at those words for a long time. They were pointed enough that my family would understand the reference, but vague enough that most people wouldn't. It was my truth, delivered with grace rather than rage. I posted it to Instagram at 7 p.m. Paris time, which was 1 p.m. in Charleston. Isabella's wedding had been Saturday, so by now she'd be on her honeymoon or at least basking in the post-wedding glow, probably posting her own professional photos. I closed the app immediately after posting, too nervous to watch the reactions roll in. Maya and I went to dinner, trying to distract ourselves with wine and conversation about anything except Instagram. But by the time we got back to the hotel 2 hours later, my phone was exploding with notifications. The post had already gotten over 2,000 likes, far more than anything I'd ever posted before. And the comments were pouring in. This is absolutely stunning. Where is this dress from? I need it. Paris goals. You look like a fairy tale princess. Wait, is this a thing? Solo bridal shoots? I'm obsessed with this concept. I scrolled through dozens of similar comments, my heart racing. Then I saw messages from people I actually knew, distant cousins, old school friends, even a few professional contacts, all expressing amazement. But nothing from my immediate family. Not my parents, not Isabella. Radio silence from the people who should have cared most. It's going viral, Maya said, looking at her own phone. Look, someone already shared it to a wedding inspiration page. They're calling it Solo Bridal Paris Shoot and asking if this is a new trend. I checked the share count. Already over 300 shares within the wedding photography community I followed online. People were talking about it, dissecting it, asking questions. Someone had tagged several bridal magazines in the comments, suggesting they feature the shoot. This is insane, I whispered. This is actually going viral. Maya was grinning. You created something people respond to emotionally. This is what happens when genuine emotion meets professional quality. People can feel the authenticity radiating from this image. We stayed up late watching the numbers climb. By midnight Paris time, the post had 5,000 likes and had been shared over 1,000 times. A major wedding blog had reached out asking to feature it. 2 photographers wanted to know who had shot it so they could credit Isabel properly. A dress designer asked about the gown. And still, nothing from my family. I went to bed that night with my phone buzzing constantly with new notifications. It should have felt triumphant, but instead, I felt strangely empty. I had wanted validation, proof that I mattered, and I was getting it from thousands of strangers. But the people whose recognition I'd craved most remained silent. Wednesday morning, we packed for our flight home. My post was still gaining traction. Overnight, it had been picked up by a major lifestyle website with millions of followers. They'd written a short article about the solo wedding shoot trend taking social media by storm, featuring my photo prominently. The numbers were staggering now. Over 15,000 likes. Nearly 5,000 shares. Comments in multiple languages. People were asking where to book similar shoots, tagging friends, sharing their own stories of being excluded from family events. I had unintentionally tapped into something bigger than my personal grievance. The photo resonated with people who'd felt overlooked, dismissed, or excluded. It represented reclaiming your own narrative when others tried to write you out of the story. On the flight home, exhaustion caught up with me. I slept most of the way, my phone on airplane mode to avoid the constant notifications. Maya kept checking during our layover, giving me updates. A bridal magazine wants to interview you, she reported at our connection in New York. And someone from a morning show reached out. They want to do a segment on solo celebration shoots. That's crazy, I said. I'm not qualified to speak about trends. I just wanted nice photos. You started something, Maya insisted. Whether you meant to or not. We landed in Charleston late Wednesday evening. I had several missed calls from my mother and a string of texts from Isabella. I didn't read them on the ride home, too tired to deal with whatever storm was brewing. Thursday morning, I woke up in my own bed to my phone ringing. My mother. I considered ignoring it, but after the fourth call, I answered. Amara, what on earth were you thinking? Her voice was sharp with anger I'd rarely heard directed at me before. Good morning to you too, I said, sitting up and rubbing sleep from my eyes. Don't be flippant. You posted that ridiculous photo during Isabella's wedding weekend. Do you have any idea how inappropriate that was? I posted it on Monday, I corrected calmly. 2 days after the wedding. It doesn't matter when you posted it. It's everywhere now. People keep sending it to Isabella, asking if you're her sister, asking why you weren't at the wedding. You've completely overshadowed her special day. I felt a surge of anger. Her special day that I wasn't invited to. That wedding I was deliberately excluded from because you thought I'd be too much of a distraction. We explained the situation, my mother said tightly. This was Isabella's time to shine, and you couldn't even give her that. You had to make it about yourself. I went to Paris, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I took photos that I'm proud of. I posted one picture to my personal Instagram account. How is any of that about Isabella? Because of the timing. You knew, the timing was the only weekend I could afford the trip, I interrupted. Or did you expect me to schedule my entire life around an event I wasn't allowed to attend? Silence on the other end. Then, tightly, Isabella is very upset. Isabella excluded me from her wedding without a conversation or explanation, I said. I'm sorry if my life existing publicly upset her, but that's not my problem. This is exactly why we didn't invite you, my mother snapped. This kind of attitude. This need for attention. You've always been jealous of your sister. Something inside me snapped. I've never been jealous, I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. I've been hurt. I've been dismissed. I've been treated as less important my entire life. But I'm not jealous, and I'm done apologizing for existing. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. In all my years of accepting their treatment, I had never directly confronted my mother like that. It felt simultaneously empowering and terrifying. Within an hour, Isabella called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. You sabotaged my wedding, she said immediately, her voice thick with tears or rage or both. I wasn't even in the same country as your wedding, I replied evenly. You know what I mean. Everyone is talking about your stupid Paris photos instead of my wedding. I spent over a year planning every detail, and you ruined it with one attention-seeking post. Isabella, I didn't do anything to you. I took photos in Paris. That's it. During my wedding weekend. You planned it specifically to take attention away from me. Actually, I said, I planned it because it was the only weekend I wasn't expected to participate in family events. Since I wasn't invited to yours. Mom explained why, Isabella started. No, I cut her off. Mom made excuses. There's a difference. You wanted me excluded, and you got what you wanted. But you don't get to control what I do with my own life and my own social media. I barely got any engagement on my wedding photos, Isabella said, and now she was definitely crying. 200 likes. My photographer's post got even less. But your stupid fake wedding shoot has gone viral. Do you know how that feels? Part of me wanted to feel sympathy. A smaller part than I expected. I imagine it feels like being told you're not good enough to attend your sister's wedding, I said quietly. Like being erased from family photos and events. Like being the eternal disappointment who never quite measures up. So yes, Isabella, I know exactly how that feels. She hung up on me. I sat on my couch staring at my phone, feeling both vindicated and hollowed out. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? For them to see me, to acknowledge my existence, to feel some consequence for how they'd treated me. But it didn't feel as satisfying as I'd thought it would. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Are you okay? Saw your Instagram comments. Your family found out. I replied, yeah, they're mad. But I'm okay. Maya, good. You did nothing wrong. Remember that. I spent Thursday catching up on work emails and trying to ignore the continued explosion of my Instagram post. It had passed 20,000 likes now. Multiple blogs had featured it. 2 more magazines had reached out. A wedding planning company wanted to sponsor similar shoots and asked if I'd be interested in becoming a brand ambassador. It was surreal. I'd gone to Paris to create one beautiful moment for myself, and somehow I'd accidentally launched a social media movement. Friday afternoon, an unknown number called. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Is this Amara? This is Melissa from Bridal Dreams magazine. We'd love to feature your Paris shoot in our next issue and do a full interview about the experience. Bridal Dreams, one of the biggest bridal publications in the country. The same magazine that had allegedly sent photographers to cover Isabella's wedding. I'm interested, I heard myself say. What would that involve? As Melissa explained the opportunity, a 4-page spread, professional treatment, my story told in my own words, they were calling it a new kind of celebration. When you're your own guest of honor, I realized this was bigger than I'd imagined. After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence. Then I started laughing. Not cruel laughter, but the kind born from disbelief and irony. Isabella had spent $750,000 to get magazine coverage. And I'd accidentally gotten it with one Instagram post and a $6,000 trip to Paris. The magazine interview was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, my Instagram post continued its trajectory. It hit 40,000 likes, then 60,000. Brands started reaching out with sponsorship offers. A travel company wanted to create a solo celebration package based on my experience. A dress designer wanted to collaborate on a line of non-wedding formal wear for women celebrating themselves. I was overwhelmed. I was a freelance photographer who could barely afford rent most months, and suddenly I had opportunities that could transform my financial situation entirely. But more than the money or attention, I felt seen. Thousands of people understood what I'd done and why it mattered. My family, however, was spiraling. Saturday morning, my father called. Unlike my mother, he wasn't yelling. He sounded tired. Amara, can we talk? In person? I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near my apartment that afternoon. When I arrived, he was already there, looking older than I remembered. The stress of the past week showed on his face. Thank you for coming, he said as I sat down. What did you want to talk about? He sighed, stirring his coffee unnecessarily. Your mother and sister are very upset. I know. They've made that clear. They feel you deliberately tried to ruin Isabella's wedding. And what do you think? I asked directly. He was quiet for a long moment. I think we didn't handle the wedding situation well. Your mother was worried about family dynamics, about keeping things smooth for Isabella's day. But maybe we went too far. Maybe. We should have included you, he said quietly, meeting my eyes. That's what I came here to say. We should have found a way to make everyone feel welcome. But we didn't. No, you didn't. I'm sorry, he said. I should have stood up for you, and I didn't. It was the first apology I'd received from anyone in my family. It should have felt more satisfying. I appreciate that, Dad, I said carefully. But this isn't just about the wedding. This is about years of being treated like I don't matter as much as Isabella. The wedding was just the final, most obvious example. I know, he said, and he looked genuinely pained. Your mother and we saw Isabella's confidence and success, and we wanted to encourage that. But we didn't realize how much we were neglecting you in the process. You realized, I corrected gently. You just didn't think it mattered enough to change. He didn't argue. Instead, he pulled out his phone and showed me something. Isabella's Instagram account. Her wedding photos had comments disabled, and where there should have been hundreds of likes, there were barely any. She's devastated, he said. All that planning, all that money, and nobody seems to care. Meanwhile, your Paris photos are everywhere. She feels like you stole her moment. I didn't steal anything, I said firmly. I created my own moment. The fact that people responded to it more enthusiastically than they did to her wedding isn't my fault or my responsibility. I know that. Logically, I know that. He put his phone away. But she's my daughter too, and she's hurting. So am I said. I've been hurting for years, and none of you noticed or cared. Now suddenly it matters because Isabella's feelings are hurt. That's not fair, is it? I stood up. Dad, I'm glad you apologized about the wedding. But one apology doesn't undo decades of dismissal. And I'm not going to apologize for living my life and posting about it just because it makes Isabella uncomfortable. I left before he could respond. The Bridal Dreams article came out 3 weeks later. They'd done a stunning layout with several of Isabella's photos, and the interview was thoughtful and well-written. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My Instagram followers jumped from 3,000 to over 100,000 in 1 week. But the real impact was in my inbox, letters and messages from women sharing their own stories of feeling overlooked, excluded, or dismissed by family. Many had gone on to create their own moments of celebration, inspired by my Paris shoot. I read every message, often with tears in my eyes, realizing that my personal act of defiance had become something much larger, a movement of women giving themselves permission to celebrate without waiting for validation. A week after the magazine came out, Isabella showed up at my apartment unannounced. I almost didn't let her in, but curiosity won. She looked different, smaller somehow, less sure of herself. The confidence that had always defined her seemed shaken. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped aside to let her in. We sat in my small living room, an awkward silence stretching between us. "I read the magazine article," she finally said. "The things you said about feeling excluded, about not being celebrated. What about them?" I never thought about it like that. From my perspective, I was just living my life, being successful, getting what I worked for. I didn't realize. She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "Didn't realize what?" "That you felt so invisible. That we made you feel that way." I waited, saying nothing. "I'm not apologizing for my wedding," Isabella continued, some of her old defensiveness returning. "Or for my life. But I am sorry that you felt excluded for so long that you had to go to Paris alone to feel celebrated. It wasn't a perfect apology. It was wrapped in qualifications and defensiveness. But it was something." "Thank you," I said simply. "Are we ever going to be okay?" she asked. "As sisters?" I thought about that carefully. "I don't know. Maybe. But it would require you actually seeing me as an equal, not as someone who exists in your shadow or as a threat to your shine." She nodded slowly. "The thing is, your Paris photos proved you were never in my shadow. You just made it look that way by staying quiet all those years." She left shortly after, and I sat in my apartment thinking about her words. She wasn't entirely wrong. I had made myself smaller for years, accepting the role of overlooked daughter because it seemed easier than fighting. But I wasn't that person anymore. The opportunities kept coming. By the end of the month, I'd signed a contract with a luxury travel brand to create content for their solo celebration campaign. The payment was more than I'd made in the previous 6 months combined. A boutique hotel chain reached out about an ongoing partnership. 3 different photography workshops wanted me to teach sessions about creating authentic, emotionally resonant content. My financial situation transformed overnight. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't worried about making rent or calculating whether I could afford groceries and camera equipment in the same week. 2 months after my Paris trip, I was invited to speak at a women's empowerment conference in Atlanta. The topic: creating your own narrative when others try to write you out. I was terrified. Public speaking wasn't something I'd ever done, but Maya talked me into it. "This is what you've been working toward your whole life," she said. "Not the fame or money, but the validation that your voice matters. Don't waste this opportunity." The conference was held in a large hotel ballroom. I stood backstage, hands shaking, as I listened to the speaker before me wrap up. Then it was my turn. I walked onto that stage, looked out at the sea of faces, and told my story. I talked about being the invisible daughter, about the wedding exclusion, about deciding to go to Paris. I showed the photos, discussed the viral response, the complicated aftermath. And when I finished, the applause was thunderous. Women came up to me afterward, sharing their own stories of family exclusion, of being overlooked, of finding courage to celebrate themselves anyway. Several were crying. Many hugged me. "You made me feel less alone," one woman said through tears. "I thought I was the only one whose family treated them like this." That night in my hotel room, I reflected on how far I'd come. 3 months ago, I'd been the excluded sister, hurt and invisible. Now I was someone whose story resonated with thousands. But I still felt the ache of family disconnection. Success didn't erase that pain, it just made it more complicated. 6 months after Paris, I was invited to appear on a national morning show to discuss the solo celebration movement that had emerged from my viral post. The segment was titled "Why Women Are Celebrating Themselves," and I was nervous about how they'd frame the story. The interview went better than expected. The host was warm and genuinely interested. When she asked about my sister's wedding, I was careful with my words. The exclusion hurt deeply, but it also clarified some things for me. I realized I'd been waiting my whole life for my family to see me as valuable. And I finally understood that I didn't need their permission to celebrate myself. "And your relationship with your family now?" the host asked. "Complicated," I admitted honestly. "We're in a difficult place. But I'm at peace with that because I'm no longer sacrificing my own well-being to maintain a relationship that was never healthy to begin with." After the show aired, my followers jumped to over 300,000. More brand deals. More speaking invitations. The momentum was dizzying. The real turning point came when Bridal Dreams reached out again. They wanted a follow-up piece, the aftermath, how one photo changed everything. The twist? They wanted to interview Isabella too. Both sisters' perspectives on what had happened. My first instinct was to refuse, but my new literary agent, yes, I'd been approached about writing a book, saw opportunity. "If you're confident in your truth, let her speak. The contrast will be revealing." I agreed with conditions. I wanted to see Isabella's interview before publication and the right to respond. When they sent me the transcript, I read it with mixed emotions. Isabella portrayed herself as the victim of my jealousy, someone whose perfect day had been deliberately sabotaged by a bitter older sister. She claimed I'd always been envious of her success, that I'd posted the Paris photos specifically to hurt her, that my entire trip was calculated revenge. What struck me most was the lack of accountability. In her version, she bore no responsibility for the exclusion, that was entirely our parents' decision, and she'd simply gone along with it. I wrote my response carefully, focusing on facts, the timeline, the years of being treated as less important, the invitation that excluded only me, the decision to use that weekend for self-celebration because I wasn't included anyway. "I can't control how my sister interprets my actions," I wrote. "But I can tell my truth. And my truth is that I spent 27 years being invisible in my own family. Going to Paris wasn't revenge. It was survival. It was choosing to celebrate myself when nobody else would. The article came out and was explosive. Reader comments made it clear who they believed. Thousands pointed out Isabella's lack of self-awareness and continued dismissal of my feelings. The article went viral in its own right, shared across platforms, discussed on podcasts, analyzed in think pieces about family dynamics. Isabella's Instagram went quiet after that. My parents didn't reach out. The silence should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the final severing of already damaged ties. 8 months after Paris, I signed a lease on a new apartment, a beautiful 2-bedroom place in a historic Charleston neighborhood with high ceilings and large windows, perfect for a home photography studio. I could afford it comfortably now. Maya helped me move in, and we celebrated with champagne on my new balcony. "You did it," she said, raising her glass. "You actually built a whole new life." "We did it," I corrected. "You were there for every step." "So what's next?" "The book. More travel content. But also, I want to help other people tell their stories, women who feel invisible, who need permission to celebrate themselves. I'm thinking about starting workshops, creating a platform for those voices." Maya smiled. "That's perfect. You found your purpose." Maybe I had. Not just in success or recognition, but in using my experience to help others feel less alone. The book was published the following June, exactly 1 year after my Paris trip. The title, Uninvited, Celebrating Yourself When Others Count You Out. The cover featured one of Isabella's photos, me in the ivory dress with the Eiffel Tower behind me. The launch party was held at an art gallery in downtown Charleston. Over 200 people attended, friends, colleagues, followers who'd become friends, women whose stories had intersected with mine. Maya gave a toast that made me cry. My agent spoke about authentic storytelling. My family wasn't there. I'd sent invitations out of courtesy, not expectation. They didn't respond. The book hit bestseller lists within the first week. Women shared it in book clubs, posted quotes on social media, wrote to me about how it helped them process family trauma. But success came with complications. My parents' lawyer sent a cease and desist letter claiming defamation. My publisher's legal team concluded everything I'd written was factually accurate or clearly personal perspective, protected under freedom of speech. The threat went nowhere. Isabella wrote an op-ed about being portrayed unfairly in someone else's narrative. She never mentioned me by name, but the subtext was clear. The response was largely unsympathetic. People noted she could have reached out privately to repair the relationship but chose public statements instead. 1 year after Paris, I was traveling frequently for book tours and speaking engagements. Each time I told my story, I saw recognition in audience faces. So many people understood what it felt like to be overlooked. Then I received an unexpected email from a family therapist named Dr. Patricia Chen, specializing in sibling dynamics and parental favoritism. "I've used your story in sessions with clients," she wrote. "It's helped them understand that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. I'm writing a book about family scapegoating and would love to interview you." The interview was thoughtful, exploring not just what happened but why these patterns develop. "You broke the pattern," Dr. Chen told me. "Most scapegoated children spend their lives trying to earn approval that will never come. You chose a different path, you validated yourself instead of waiting for them to do it." That conversation helped me understand my story in a larger context. I wasn't just the excluded sister. I was someone who'd recognized a toxic pattern and made the hard choice to step away. 16 months after Paris, I spoke at a major conference in New York to over 1,000 people. Standing on that stage, I thought about the scared, invisible girl I'd been, the one who believed she wasn't worth celebrating unless someone else decided she was. I told my story to those 1,000 faces. Showed the Paris photos. Talked about everything that followed. And then I said something I'd been thinking about for months: going to Paris wasn't revenge. It was revolution. Personal revolution. The quiet kind that happens when you stop asking for permission to exist fully and start granting it to yourself. My family wanted me to be invisible, and for years I complied. But in Paris, I made myself visible, and I discovered that when you shine your own light, you don't need anyone else's approval to be luminous. The applause was deafening. That evening, walking through Central Park, I reflected on everything that had changed. My career was thriving beyond imagination. I had financial security, professional recognition, a platform to help others. But I'd also lost my family. Or perhaps I'd simply acknowledged a loss that had always existed. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. When I opened it, I saw it was from Isabella. I saw your New York speech online. You were right about some things. I've been in therapy now, working through my own issues. I'm not ready to talk yet. But I wanted you to know I'm trying to understand. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was acknowledgement. I replied simply, I'm glad you're taking care of yourself. When you're ready to talk, I'm here. Whether she'd ever take me up on that, I didn't know. But I meant it. I'd built a life that didn't require her approval or presence, but there was still a part of me that hoped for healing, not a return to old dynamics, but something new and healthier. 18 months after that Paris sunrise, the consequences of my family's choices became increasingly clear. My parents' social circle had read my book. Many distanced themselves, uncomfortable with revelations about how they'd treated me. Their reputation suffered. They retired early and moved to a smaller town where nobody knew their history, unable to face judgment in their former neighborhood. Isabella's career stalled after the wedding incident and subsequent publicity. Her firm quietly let her go during restructuring, though it was clear her viral notoriety had made her a liability. Gregory filed for divorce 8 months into their marriage, unable to handle what he called her obsession with appearances over substance. She moved back in with our parents for a while, a humbling experience for someone who'd spent her life being celebrated as the successful one. As for me, I sat on my apartment balcony 2 years after that Paris sunrise, watching Charleston wake up on a peaceful Sunday morning. My second book was releasing next month, a guide to solo celebration and self-validation for women reclaiming their narratives. I'd launched a successful online community providing resources and support for women navigating family exclusion. Maya and I were planning another Paris trip, this time purely for pleasure. The journey from invisible daughter to woman with her own voice had been painful and messy and more complicated than any revenge fantasy could capture. But sitting there with my coffee, watching morning light paint the city gold, I realized something important. I hadn't just escaped being overlooked. I'd learned to see myself clearly. To celebrate myself genuinely. To shine without needing anyone's permission or approval. And in teaching others to do the same, I'd found something more valuable than family acceptance. I'd found purpose. Community. And most importantly, I'd found myself. Sometimes the best revenge isn't punishment at all. Sometimes it's simply refusing to stay small. Building a life so bright that those who tried to dim you can't help but notice, and realize too late what they lost when they chose not to see you in the first place. My phone buzzed with a message from a woman who'd attended my Atlanta conference. Because of your story, I booked my own Paris trip. I'm celebrating my promotion, the one my family said I'd never achieve. Thank you for showing me I don't need their approval to be proud of myself. I smiled, typing back, you never needed anyone's permission to shine. I'm so proud of you. And I meant it with my whole heart. Because that's what this whole journey had taught me, we don't need permission to celebrate ourselves. We don't need validation from people who've decided we're not worth seeing. We don't need to wait for others to grant us value. We just need the courage to grant it to ourselves. And once we do, once we truly claim our own worth and celebrate our own existence, something magical happens. We become permission for others to do the same. That Paris sunrise photograph, the one that started everything, now hangs in my living room, large and proud and impossible to miss. It's not just a beautiful image. It's a reminder that I chose myself when nobody else would. And that choice changed everything.